Well, we are very fortunate now to welcome Xaser Acheron of Nightdive Studios, whose work in the original modding space for Doom maps in the early 2000s eventually led him to spearhead the most recent classic Doom campaign titled Legacy of Rust, easily one of my favorites. This was released with Doom 1 and 2 collection back in 2004. Xaser, welcome to XEP.
Well, thank you very much. Oh my gosh, I'm happy to be here.
Can you tell I practiced that intro?
A little bit. Like,
Yeah.
you practice it a bit more than mine because I'm sitting here like, hi, hello, welcome. I'm glad to be here. Yeah, but
I get it, man. I get it. But it's one of those things like people that don't know your name will eventually through the course of this interview and in general find that you've had your hand in Doom and Doom culture for a long time. We'll start with Legacy of Rust, work our way back and then back and forth here and there. Legacy of Rust, an incredible campaign, and I'm thrilled to find out just the design philosophies that you incorporated with it. But this campaign was released in August of 2024 and showcased at QuakeCon earlier in the year. How long had you been working on Legacy of Rust prior to its release?
I think about a year off and on, but off and on is kind of the key word there. It was kind of a fun spare time project for most of us involved, and it didn't really turn into a full-time thing for me until about the tail end of it, which is when I got hired at Nightdive. But I think it was mostly just a couple of enthusiastic folks like got the chance. We started talking about it. The id guys liked the pitch, and we just kind of had fun making a Doom mod like we had previously. Like the designs were a little different given what we had access to and what the, our goals, but the process felt a whole lot like any other kind of Doom mod team project, like a bunch of just fun, enthusiastic people working on it when they can.
Interesting. That is so you've opened the door to several things that I was not aware of. My knowledge of this campaign is that it was made in conjunction between Nightdive, id Software, and MachineGames. And those are no slouches in the world of first-person shooters, obviously. But it sounds to me like this was almost a fan project at first, and then they picked it up. Am I interpreting that correctly?
It's the reverse, but here, it'll make it a little bit more sense if I kind of explain the full history.
Okay.
So there's a guy named Kevin Dunlop, works at id, used to work at MachineGames, and he worked on the new maps for the Quake 2 MachineGames expansion. And the genesis of the project, basically, he heard, we're doing Doom, and went to one of the guys, Mike Rubit, Sponge, who was programming it, and was like, hey, are we going to do Doom maps? And Sponge was like, maybe, go talk to this guy. And then sent Kevin my way. And then we started talking, and he was just like, Kevin was like, oh my gosh, I really want to make a Doom map. Can we do this? And I'm like, yeah, we can do this. So it was a fan project and not, because I guess a way to say it is it's both, because it was a fan project. It's just some of the fans happened to work at MachineGames and id. Like Thomas Carter was one of the other guys who worked on the project. He works at MachineGames. And so those two just kind of approached it with the same sort of enthusiasm that you would see from a fan project. And so between that, like, I was happy to know that the once we started working on it, it didn't really feel any different. Like, there was sort of a little bit of a fear for a little bit that we're like, okay, if we make this an official thing, is it going to start feeling more like proper game dev? Or are we going to kind of lose that community spirit, so to speak? But I didn't, it never happened. Like, people just kind of were as excited to work on it as they were any other sort of, Doom project. So like, it was both. Like, even though it was made in conjunction with the id and MachineGames guys, like, my impression of it was, hey, these are guys who are just as enthusiastic about making levels as we are. And so it felt the same in a good way.
So anyone that's not familiar with your work may not realize that your career essentially began in the Doom modding scene. Do I have that part correct?
Yes. Yeah. No, you were about to say something. You first.
Well, no, I would much rather you elaborate on that, because you obviously ended up at Nightdive, which Nightdive known for their Kex engine and a number of other incredible collections and remasters, etc. So talk to me about how you ended up at Nightdive, and then we'll move on from there.
Well, the funny thing is, so Nightdive has like a lot of Doom community people in it. Like the Kex team was started by Samuel Villarreal, aka Xaser, who was like, he was a Doom community legend long before I did. And so his work on Doom 64 eventually turned into an engine, which turned into, I think it was Strife that came first. Anyhow, there's a whole story on how he got involved with Nightdive, but like between him and a lot of other folks, like I've known them for a while. And it literally was when I joined Nightdive, the response I got from people was, yeah, about time. Why did it take you that long?
So does that mean you were just a fan making stuff and working at another job somewhere else? Like, was that how it was operating? And then you took a full job? Who approached who?
Well, I basically at one point sent my resume off to Stephen Kick. Like we'd met before and talked about stuff, and I was just looking for a new job. And it was during the development of Legacy of Rust, but it wasn't like I didn't apply for Rust, if that made sense. Like there were other projects behind the scenes. Actually, the first project I worked on full time at Nightdive was the Thing Remastered, which came out earlier this year and did really. Or was it this year or last year? I'm losing track of time.
Yeah, me too. It was this year. I'm currently playing the Dark Forces stuff because I mean, Nightdive's just got so many cool things.
Yeah. Awesome. So I approached them and they said, heck yes. And we just kind of, it worked out. But also it was a case where I feel like in a sense, they've always been like not intentionally approaching me, but they've been around in the peripheral for so long that it was inevitable that I would get caught up in the orbit, because like Nightdive's entire approach to how they remaster games is they always reach out to people who are fans of the games or original developers. Like that's part of the magic. And so I guess I was always on the list in some way, shape, or form, because that it fits the quote unquote Nightdive demographic, end quote. So I don't think they were intentionally fishing for me, but I definitely was looking at the hook for a while and finally bit. And I have not regretted it.
Yeah, no, I can't imagine you would, especially with given how Legacy of Rust came out. Did you already have a relationship with, and it sounds like the answer is yes, but correct me if I'm wrong, did you already have a relationship with some of the id and MachineGames members because of your work in the modding space?
Yes, and how that worked out was whenever the Doom 2 Unity port came out, prior to the Nightdive remaster, Sponge, Mike Rubitz, basically started featuring mods and hosting mods. And I just got involved as like a sort of consultant of sorts, like working and helping fix some stuff up and becoming a technical guy on that. And that's, you know, there's some other little sneaky things behind the scenes or whatever, but like I just got lucky enough to meet some of the id guys and we got to know each other. And whenever the topic of classic Doom things would come up, they always included me in the discussions. And I'm like, damn, thanks guys. And so a little bit of it was kind of like that connection was there by the time Legacy of Rust like was just a faint idea in somebody's head, which led to, you know, Mike pointing Kevin my way whenever the question got asked. It still feels silly to me because like, I feel like I should have probably thought about the idea of a Doom expansion, but I think my brain was elsewhere just at work at the time. And then when Kevin came to me and was like, hey, we should do this. And I'm like, why didn't I think of that? Yeah, we should do this.
So it took roughly a year to develop. Am I tracking that correctly?
Yes, but it was like, when I say a year, it was like doing a little bit of mapping off and on here and there. And a year is really rough. I literally have to go back to the calendar to check. But it was like just chipping in as we had little bits and pieces and had time. Like it was intended to be a fun project, not a super stressful deadline type of thing. So,
my understanding is they cracked open the vault for you guys to gain access to kind of unreleased enemy designs from the original Doom and Doom 2, textures, that kind of stuff. Am I correct?
Yes. Oh my gosh. That was like triple Christmas. So part of it was there was basically a big hard drive backup of an id developer's PC from way back in the 90s. I'm not sure whose, but it contained all sorts of files, original Doom development stuff. There was even like Autodesk animation files that were probably from Kevin Cloud's PC back in the day. I'm guessing it was him. It may have been Adrian's, but like it was an insane treasure trove of unreleased content, some of which had been previously posted online, but this was like the full deal. And I was floored at how many like full sets of sprites existed. Like the Banshee enemy, the big angry red screaming face. that was just a random set of sprites that existed in a texture file. And it was possibly a design for Doom 2's cut blob enemy. But either way, I looked at that and I'm like, that's got to be a monster. We have to use that. Like, so a lot of Rust was taking all those assets and figuring out, okay, what can we do with these? That's awesome. Another sort of thing that, like, once we started getting things underway, like when Kevin approached me and we started brainstorming a pitch for the project, one of the things I really wanted to do, which led to the Vault, was I didn't want it to just be levels. Like back in the day, before I played Doom, funny enough, Quake 2 released when I was a kid, and Quake 2 was awesome. I got a box set of Quake 2 and both of its expansions and a little fourth CD with a bunch of like mods on it, which was really cool, including like a racer bot. I played bot match for like hours. It was crazy. But what always made me excited is, yes, base Quake 2 is great. And then you fire up the Reckoning and you're like, what gun is this? What the heck is the Phalanx cannon? This is amazing. Like, it had new like weapons and monsters. Like within the first couple of minutes of the game, you're fighting these weird swamp creatures with like yellow acid blood. And something about the new weapons and monsters just clicked with me in the expansions. And I always wanted to take that energy and make a Doom project with it. Like something that felt like, here's an expansion they could have released in the 90s, like with weapons and monsters, because Final Doom's great. Like Plutonia is amazing. TNT has its ups and downs, but overall is a really solid WAD. But they were just levels. And I'm like, where's the new monsters? Where's the new weapons? Blah, blah. And, you know, and it was a pipe dream of mine. And then when we start talking about, hey, we should do maps, a light bulb goes off in my head. And I'm like, oh my gosh, we can do it. We can do the expansion thing. Oh my gosh. And so that just kind of led towards, all right, what can we do? Can we make some new monsters? Can we make some new weapons? And it turned out there were like a lot of assets. There was an id artist who was really excited to make a new creature. It's a Dakota Can who made the Visago. She was just like super stoked about the idea of making a classic Doom monster. And I'm like, wait, really? Okay, yeah, let's do this. So like one thing led to another. And that was kind of one of the driving forces behind its design, so to speak, is to make it feel like a classic expansion pack. Like, can we make the Scourge of Armagon of Doom, basically? Like, can we make that happen? And so hope we got it. People seem to really like the episode. That's really cool.
They really do. And it's fascinating to me to see, one, what you guys got in there, because to your point about TNT Evolution and the Plutonia experiment, they felt like WADs, and even their final bosses were just, you know, reskins of the Icon of Sin and such. And so it was really neat for me as somebody who gets to experience this through the 1 and 2 collection to kind of go through, because of the way that it was so well presented. Like they showcased the entire Doom pantheon in order, which was just the coolest thing. And then when you start up Legacy of Rust and you see these new enemies, you take a step back. Like you see the stuff because it looks like it belongs. That Banshee looks like it belongs. The Ghoul looks like it belongs. But it's all fresh and new. And that has to be a fine line to walk in terms of creating something new while honoring the original.
It is. It's really hard. One of the things that makes it a little tricky too is when you actually go back and look at Doom's assets, and this is coming from my years of like modding as a big super turbo nerd, as they call them. But there's actually a mix of art styles in Doom. Like if you look at the imp sprites, they look a lot more, for lack of a better term, pixel arty than say the hanging bodies you find in Doom 1, which look a little bit more like downscaled photos. Like some of the textures too, you can kind of tell that they were taken from photos. And that sort of mix of quirky art styles is something that we just have ingrained in our head. Like that's just the look of Doom. And so whenever you're needing to make new content that fits alongside the original, you almost have to figure out how to make the inconsistencies work. Like they're minor, but they do exist. And that's one thing that's a little hard. One thing I think that, here's a good example. If you actually pull out the sprites for the Calamity Blade, that's the new BFG tier weapon. That actually was made from photo shoots. There's a guy at id, Roger Barones, who he's like the lead mocap guy. And he was like, hey, I'm gonna take some pictures of stuff. And we had like the original BFG toy that was made to photograph the BFG 9000 for Doom 1. And for the Calamity Blade, I basically took it and spun it the other direction, and we took pictures of the handle and then mirrored it, and that made the Calamity Blade. And so if you
I see it. I see it.
Yeah, it's literally they handle the gun sideways to make it kind of look like a bow. And but there is a cheesy photo-ish quality to the sprites that's actually intentional, because that sort of photo rippiness, you also see it in the BFG sprites. Like there's a lot of pixel cleanup that went into making the weapons exist, but you still see a tiny bit of it in a lot of the original Doom weapons, and that was something that we wanted to preserve. So you'll see that, and then maybe you'll look at the ghoul, and then if you look really, really closely, there's a little bit of an art style difference, because the ghoul looks more like a pixel arted sprite than, say, the Calamity Blade does. So matching the look is kind of like balancing two different, not necessarily contradictions, but like it's a tricky line to walk, and some things work great and some things don't. Like, putting on my critical hat for a little bit, the Calamity Blade sprites turned out better than, say, the Incinerator, the Flamethrower. And that's because I did the Incinerator and it's not as good. I'm not a huge artist. So there's a couple of assets where I'm like, that didn't turn out quite as good. And almost all of them is because I did it. And I'm like, I need to brush my skills up. Like, anyhow.
Are you being too critical, or like, is this feedback you've gotten from other places?
It's feedback that I see. I think it's mostly just like a vocal minority who will kind of point things out. But like, there's a couple of things that will get pointed out as like, if people do have complaints, it's a couple of different things. And one of them is the Flamethrower sprites. One's like the Flamethrower behavior, because it's kind of hard to use. Like some people, it's like, oh my gosh, this is a powerhouse. And other folks are like, dude, every time I use it, I just die. Like and I'm like, yeah, you got to learn how to use the weapon. And if that's not your thing, it's going to annoy the crap out of you compared to the plasma rifle. And but that's a design thing where I'm like, it is what it is, and not everybody's going to like it. And I would rather do something interesting than something safe, if that made sense. And there's definitely a few instances of that in Legacy of Rust, where we're like, we're going to do something kind of bold here, and it's not going to be everybody's cup of tea, but we're just going to do it. And that leads up to the Coiled City, which is the map that everybody either loves the most or hates the most. There is no in between. People despise it, or they're like, this is great. And I'm like, aha, yes, that's the intended reaction. I'm laughing evilly behind the scenes.
Yeah, it's not just that one. There's a couple levels where I'm just like, what are you thinking? And it's cool though. Like, it's really fascinating. But I'll skip a bit ahead on the questioning. Just the amount of creativity in using old design to create a new experience on display is masterful. You and that team just seem to do things that shouldn't work, but they work incredibly. I'm curious if you had designs or things that were in that same vault we talked about that were rejected that maybe you came back to. Like, were some of those levels on design docs at any point, or was this all you guys?
Oh gosh, a lot of the stuff was originally designed. Like the Ghoul, for example, that actually appeared in some of the early Doom betas. It was the Lost Soul originally.
Right.
Yeah, so the beta Lost Soul would like do a psychic attack where it hit scanned you, and then they changed it to the new version that charges you, and the one we all love. So some of that was taking like old stuff that was cut for a reason and being like, let's repurpose this and make it work. The Mindweaver, which is the new chain gun Arachnotron, there was just a full set of sprites of a chain gun Arachnotron that existed. And that at some point in development, they must have intended for it to literally be a mini Spider Mastermind before they were like, let's change it to have a plasma gun instead. Because the sprites existed, right? So you can kind of see evidence of design changes that happened. There were even cut assets that were probably cut for like quality or opinion reasons back in the day that I'm like, no, we're going to bring this back and make it work. And one of my favorites is there is a texture in the game. If you actually open a map, the texture is named Don't Use, because the original texture, when it appeared on the sheet, literally had the words in red, Don't Use, under it. And I'm like, we're going to use it as a joke. So there were definitely cases where stuff was probably considered and cut back in the 90s, and then we kind of revived it. But a lot of how that worked is sort of like educated guessing on my part. Like, okay, I think this is probably what happened based off of what I'm seeing. And it's kind of hard to really know in hindsight if that's correct or if it's just kind of like an educated guess, because it's so long ago. Like a lot of the folks just aren't in it. Most of the folks aren't in it at all anymore. And the folks that were there were just sort of like, I don't really remember. So
What about some of the world designs? Like, to make those maps that you made, some of them being as cruel as they are, Xaser, did you were designs any of those like old designs, or did you come up with the level layouts all yourself in this one?
So a lot of the levels, the ultimate level design comes down to the individual mappers, but the concepts were something that I sketched out as part of the initial pitch. There's actually a couple of like vague level ideas that come from an old sketch, I believe by Tom Hall of episode 2's Intermission back in the day. And it had some like cool names. Like that's where like Spirit Drains comes from. So there's a couple of things that sort of are very loosely based on that doc, but the overall sort of design pitch for the world of Legacy of Rust came from me basically asking the question, okay, here's the resources we have. What can we do that's interesting and unique with these resources? And because we had a whole lot of new textures, stuff that felt very doomy, so tech base and hell and stuff that kind of merged the two together, you know, your hell overtaking tech base. And so I thought, all right, so if this is the assets we have, rather than do the same thing again where hell invades Earth, what if instead we do Earth invades hell? And that was the whole idea behind Legacy of Rust. It was like, okay, the UAC has established an outpost in hell after the events of Doom 2. And so that was the sort of genesis of what became Rust's theme. And the big set piece I had in my head, you could see it in the second level in Sanguine Wastes. It's the dam. It's like a big, huge dam and a river of blood. Like that was the thing. That was my visual pitch. I did an early mock-up of that map to show people and be like, this is what we're making. Like humans are constructing stuff in hell. And they're like, that's cool. And then the other mappers just kind of ran with it. Like Kaiser made a shit ton of maps. Apologies for the swearing.
You're fine.
One of them is like a big hell factory, kind of like humans have basically built an outpost in a volcano to harness geothermal energy, and it looks like a factory. And then you look around and it's like red rock and hell everywhere, and it's like, yeah, it's the inverse of what you usually see. Like, oh gosh, sorry, I'm sitting here trying to think of too many things at once. Like Kevin's Soul Silo was just like this, like underground base full of some kind of strange nuclear soul waste, like kind of weird and surreal, like what the hell are they building kind of mystery theme. And that stuff is just cool. It's like, what kind of nonsense were they up to? And that eventually kind of led up to the ending where the sort of plot twist of the back of the napkin story for Legacy of Rust is, okay, they still need to reclaim the base, but the reason why is because they had a nuclear stockpile there and they want it back. So rather than get them their nukes back, you instead set them to self-destruct and blow the base up and leave. And that was fun. Like that was fun to make. But yeah, so it's like the final map, a big hell castle that they repurposed into a nuclear silo. Like that it was a lot of fun to like come up with little set pieces, and people just kind of like took the vague ideas I had on paper and ran with it and made some magic. I mean, ultimately what you see in the levels is their creativity, not mine. But like the ideas kind of came from, here's the resources we have. What can we do that's not just the same thing again? And that was what we did.
That was so evident to me as well, because in Scargate, and anybody that boots up Legacy of Rust, if you haven't yet, I strongly recommend playing the first two levels. Really the first three, I think, will give you the perfect scope, because Scargate, when you arrive to that gate, that portal element, and go through it, there's some cool level trickery that I just think is very fascinating. But it was very clear to me across these three levels, two things. One was scope and scale. You guys expanded the visual sight lines, especially in Sanguine Waste, when you could look out and see that dam, and the depth at which everything was happening and how many enemies you guys put on screen, which of course is put to shame later on in Legacy of Rust. But I was taken aback in that scope and scale. But also I have to note, it was like I was playing one continuous story, which, with respect to every bit of Doom Legacy, which I love, this was the most coherent campaign of sorts, where I could, move from level to level and feel like I was traversing a full story. Do you think that came by coincidence, or was that an advantage you guys had with just modern tech?
I mean, it's a little bit of both. If it comes across that way, I feel like some of that is coincidence, just because in my head, the story for Rust in particular, it's a backdrop. It's meant to drive the setting, and ultimately you're seeing environmental storytelling. That, I guess, the idea that it's kind of a cohesive theme of UAC base and hell makes it feel a little bit more connected. But I think a lot of that was the level designers made stuff that kind of just made sense in context with each other. And that was certainly coincidental, because like, I didn't want to restrict the level designs too much. Like, we didn't want to make it to where, okay, here's exactly where the story beats go, blah, blah, blah. And I guess a good example of this is we shipped it as 2 episodes. It was originally just planned as 1. And one of the guys, Guberman, Ethan Watson, made this level at Second Coming, so the first map of the 2nd episode. And it basically was balanced around the idea of like withholding equipment from the player. And rather than have like doors to unlock, you have sort of beef gates where it's like, here's a couple of barons, well, later Visagos, that you can't get past until you get the rocket launcher. And that entire concept wouldn't work if you carried all your equipment over from previous levels. So based on that, it was like, okay, well, why don't we split it into 2 episodes? And then from there, it was like, all right, well, let's add this little sort of quote unquote plot beat where you get thrown in hell prison in between the 2 episodes, and retextured a little bit of the Second Coming to make it look sort of like hell repurposed as a jail, and then added the little trap at the end of the previous map. So some of those touches were kind of done to make the episode flow coherently, but it's kind of more of a general feeling of environmental progression as much more than it is a traditional quote unquote narrative story, if that makes sense. That is one thing I'm always big on, is theme. Like having your episodes and maps have a distinct theme, and making it to where you don't repeat the same themes over and over and over again. Like, if you don't pay attention to that, then you start hitting theme fatigue. Like, if you have a 32 map megawatt and every single map is a tech base, it doesn't really, at some point, it almost doesn't matter how well constructed and how good the levels look. They're going to start blurring together and feel the same, because the theme hasn't changed much. So a little bit of the design of Rust and the elevator pitch was to figure out, like, I skipped over this part, but in addition to the, like, as part of the pitch document, I'm saying that very loosely, there was like level ideas, like here's the dam level, here's the hell sewer, here's the volcano base, and each sort of map theme pitch was kind of picked to be like, this is going to be distinct enough from the previous and next levels that it's not going to feel like the same thing over and over again. So, so I think we semi-luckily hit like this sweet spot where it felt cohesive without repeating itself. And the fact that the maps kind of flowed into each other and felt like a journey is like, I don't necessarily think it's entirely coincidental, but there definitely was a big aspect of that, if only because if I was in a situation where I had to choose between variety or consistency, I would have picked variety. Like, so if it did work together, well, dang, we figured out how to do both. Cool. I don't know if that answered your question. I feel like I rambled a bit.
No, it did. And it's sticking out of my mind. 2 things are sticking out of my mind. The first I'll touch on being when you talk about the theme consistency, and then the idea of putting a human base in hell versus some of the stuff we saw in like Doom 2, where it was hell on earth, or Doom Eternal, hell on earth. It really did feel like you flipped the script. And I feel like this in both of the examples I gave, that the hybridization was there. But it did feel flipped. I didn't feel like we were on earth and hell was invading. It did feel like the other way around. Did that take a lot of effort, or did it fall into place naturally?
I think it just fell into place naturally for me. And my guess is it was the same for the other mappers, because they just kind of killed it. Like they all just flew with the theme. They were like, all right, that sounds like a good idea. Let's make it. And then they started producing amazing work. I mean, you've got 2 professional industry level designers making stuff. And then you've got Xaser, who's been doing this for like longer than I have. It's like Guberman's levels were amazing too, because they have all these like crazy intricate set pieces. And then we were like, okay, let's texture it, make it look a little bit like it. But also the focus of those maps is like all the crazy sector machinery and stuff. And we figured out how to make that work within the theme great also. Like, why does this building work this way? What's going on? Well, it's chaotic and strange because you're in hell. Now, that was just a case of people just kind of like, I think, took to it and used their own skills to crank out some magic. I certainly didn't have to prescribe it to anybody, if that makes sense.
No, it does. Did you end up? So again, I'm going to keep going back to the idea that the 1 and 2 collection on the Kex engine is just incredible, and people need to go look at it because it teaches you the history of Doom. But it does feel like in some cases we just got WADs or mega WADs, and in other places we got canonical story and levels. Did you end up before, working through Legacy of Rust or during the process, going back and playing something like No Rest for the Living, which was, the next campaign after at the time that had shown up, something like, what was it, 14 years after Plutonia Experiment? Did you end up playing through some of those older levels or going to maybe do Doom Eternal or Doom 2016? Or did you just know what you were doing and have at it?
I mean, I played through all of them at some point. For me personally, there wasn't like a big research binge where I was playing them prior to making maps, like explicitly for the purpose of nailing the feel. But I think part of that is just because like a lot of these original campaigns I've played through so many times that they're sort of like stuck in my brain. So the training has been done over the past 20 years. That's not even an exaggerated number. And so I think if stuff kind of like feels like it clicked, part of that is because the answer is yes, but over a long period of time rather than sort of like some immediate research for the intent of making it fit together, if that makes sense.
Sure, absolutely. The other thing I want to just kind of touch on, you mentioned this like armchair or this napkin document, this design doc that you loosely had, but essentially you created a canon classic Doom campaign that extends this original timeline further than it has been extended before. That, to me, at least from the outside looking in, feels like it would be a major undertaking and responsibility, particularly given the Doom community and their expectations. All the while, Doom 2016 and Doom Eternal are existing in a separate timeline, but still feeding Doom fans. Did you feel a pressure at all in crafting this?
I definitely felt pressure just for the sake of, hey, if we're putting something next to Doom, Doom 2, Final Doom, it has to be good. Like, we can't just crap out something. But it was sort of like not an oh no kind of pressure, but a hell yes, we can do this kind of pressure. Like, and it feels like a little bit of an ego talking, but it's just because the MachineGames episodes for Quake were amazing. And so, like, given the track record of like expansions in recent years and how they've sort of delivered and the personnel we had on the project, I wasn't really worried, if that made sense. Like, towards the beginning, I was actually a little worried more about quantity. Like, are we even going to have enough to do a full episode? And then once people started chipping in, we're like, no, we're good. So the pressure was there, but it wasn't necessarily about does it fit in the Doom canon as much as it is like, hey, gameplay wise, and this has to hold up. Like, you're putting something next to it. And I actually think that the harder part for me wasn't necessarily sitting next to the rest of the Doom canon as much as it is like, hey, this also has to be something worth playing in the context of the wider Doom community, because the Doom modding community is insane in the best way. Like, they've produced so many good works. Like, in the year that we released Legacy of Rust, there are 10, 20 other projects that are better than Legacy of Rust that also got released that same year. And making something that sort of matches up, at least to sort of compete, is like hard. Like, that was sort of, I felt, the competition. Also because, like, I guess in my head, I have always sort of mentally drawn a line between the new and the old Doom games in the sense that they sort of don't necessarily compete for brain space, because there's a lot of overlap between the fans of both, but you don't typically see people like play Doom Eternal and then be like, classic Doom sucks, or vice versa, aside from like some very, minority folks that are vocal minorities that are like, whatever, I just don't like games kind of stuff. But you don't really see that sort of rivalry in a way that people would expect. So I wasn't necessarily worried about people like playing Doom Eternal and then playing Legacy of Rust and being like, this isn't as good as Eternal, or vice versa. Like, people kind of know that, hey, these games are all awesome and you're going to like one more than the other, and that's totally fine. And I guess it was mostly the wider context of making sure that we shipped something that was notable, not just because it was more like it needed to be good, not just because it was official, if that made sense. Like, sure. If we just kind of came up with something and half-assed it, then so many people would play it because it's there and it has an id stamp of approval. And if it was meh, that would have been kind of disappointing. It's like, why are people playing this thing when there's so many more good community stuff out there? So that was more of the pressure I felt, but it wasn't a, oh no pressure as much as it is, hey, here's a challenge. I bet you we can do this kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So
I think one of the cool things about the 1 and 2 collection to be alongside everything is it does allow mods to be played, WADs to be checked out. Do you have any favorite mods that you would point people to?
Oh geez, it's always kind of a hard question to answer because some of the ones that I would sort of like recommend to people are like, oh wait, did I work on that?
I see.
Yeah, it's a little funny. But if you go into the mods and then there's a featured section, I actually forget what the official nomenclature is. Is it featured? I forget. Those are sort of like the handpicked cream of the crop. Like they're not, it's not necessarily the best of the best of the best always, but like those are the things that where you're like, hey, here's big notable releases that have been featured on the platform before. And if you don't know where to start, pick one of those. But like the nice thing about it is that Doom modding like has just by itself has a pretty big reach. Like you almost don't need to put a microphone to it. So a great example is, what was it last year? My House just made a huge splash. People were all talking about this My House WAD. And that's not even something you can play on the Kex port. That requires GZ Doom. And it made a massive splash. People were reporting on all that because it's an amazing, like insane experience in the best way. And that made news independent of anything that was done to the official port or, you know, official word from id or Bethesda. Like that was just the community. Somebody released a WAD that was just so strange and weird that it blew up in the best way. And so there's, you know, there is definitely a new audience that the featured mods and the new mod uploader reach, like particularly consoles and then people who haven't necessarily dove into the Doom community yet. But I feel like I haven't really answered your question because like, oh, hey, you asked about recommended mods. Why is he talking about blah, blah, blah? But it's hard to narrow down on top of that. Like there's so many out there. I guess if you just never played a Doom mod before, Eternity 2, Back to Saturn X, like those are good places to start because those kind of show off, here are the things that people can do with Doom that you may have never seen. And My House. If you haven't played My House, go play My House. Holy crap.
Okay.
But that's just what's off the top of my head right now. And if you were to ask me the question tomorrow, I'd probably come up with a different list. There's so many out there. And I know I'm leaving a lot of mods by the wayside by not mentioning them right now. Like
you're on the spot though. You're on the spot. So it's okay.
Like, oh gosh, there's so many.
And anybody that's watching can drop in the comments, right? Or drop in the comment section on the video.
Please do leave comments for recommendations because like if people are watching this video and they're curious to see what's out there, even though this video is about Legacy of Rust, that really is just the very tiny tip of the iceberg. And like you're going to see and play stuff that far eclipses whatever you see in that campaign. Like check out Doom mods. They're great. There's a reason I've been doing this for a while.
It's the coolest thing. It really is the coolest thing. Like for me, one that stands out from, again, armchair, just loving Doom, but being kind of in a console space for it, to get to see Doom 64 and Doom 2's aesthetic was really neat. That was a fun thing just tangentially for me to just discover. And then I started going down a rabbit hole of just seeing a lot of the stuff that you mentioned. And I was like, this is incredible.
Yeah. Doom 64 and Doom 2 is awesome because they figured out how to basically classic Doomify all of Doom 64. And it just, the Mother Demon sprites just turned out great. Like that's, it fits right in with the game. And that's a hard thing to do because Doom 64, also an amazing gameplay if you haven't yet, has such a strange and unique aesthetic that even the idea of taking it and turning it into Doom 2, if that wasn't done well, then it would just feel like you just downgraded the game, right? So they really knocked it out of the park with that mod because they figured out how to, like, it's not going to feel the same, but they figured out how to inject a lot of cool into it to where it feels like an interesting, unique, like good, fun experience despite being very, very visually and feel-wise different from the original Doom 64. And that's a hard thing to do. By its nature, you have to change it. And so you got to make sure that the changes don't feel like a downgrade, but more of a side grade. And they did it. So yeah, that's a great one.
How important is, say, the Kex engine to Legacy of Rust or some of the stuff that you guys have put together versus something like GZ Doom or something else? Because again, I'm asking from a place of full ignorance. I do not know.
So Kex is kind of a hard one to describe because Kex in general is a very generic engine in the sense of, oh geez, that sounds like I'm underselling it. Generalize is maybe a better word, but the entire design of Kex is, hey, we want to take any other game engine and figure out how to, make it work with Kex, put it on top, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So Kex technically ships with things like renderer support and nice, visuals and whatever. But what you can do is you can opt into which parts of Kex you want to use. It was explicitly designed to make it work with existing games. So in Doom's case, the actual Doom engine itself, like the visuals, I want to say it's the original. It's actually a souped up multi-threaded version that was done by Ethan Watson Goober, and he calls it Rum and Raisin Doom. That was his, because it was R&R, that was the thing. Mm-hmm. Basically like a souped up version of the original renderer, but it's still software rendering, just rendered in a little square in Kex. And so what Kex actually provides out of the box is things like console integration and inputs, and a lot of those types of things, like the outer shell and the inner game itself is still Doom at its core. And a lot of the modding features that were added to sort of support community mods are things that were basically done inside the Doom code base. So Kex is just so hard to quantify, kind of, because the usage of Kex and all the different projects that Nightdive does is tailored to the specific project, to where there almost isn't one identity of Kex as much as it is how much of this are we using in the game. Like, are we totally redoing the renderer, or are we just using the inputs and not too much else? And for Doom, we did keep it, I want to say, mostly vanilla, but also a lot of the upgrades that were done to the game were done specifically for Doom, as opposed to stuff we pulled in from Kex. I feel like I'm underselling it, not really giving a great description of what the engine is, but I'm also not really an engine programmer, funny enough. Like, despite working at Nightdive and helping the team like use Kex to wire it up and do all sorts of fun stuff, I feel like I don't really know it that well yet. Like, I'm still a newbie because most of the time I spend is within the game code for the game we're actually developing. So
that makes good sense. I can understand the difference between the two, though, thanks to that description.
Yes.
So that is helpful. Notably, that is very helpful. So thank you.
Yeah.
One thing that's interesting to me is Legacy of Rust is the latest campaign for Doom, and it releases in August of 2024. But thanks to this collection, it exists next to John Romero's take on the OG classic Doom continuity, because he created Sigil and recently Sigil 2, which came out in 2019 and 2023 respectively. That has to be cool to see your work like directly alongside the OG creator. What did you think about that?
Oh my gosh, it's like I forget if I said this after we started recording or before, but like when you first reached out to me for an interview, I was sort of floored because I was like, oh my gosh, you just interviewed John Romero and now you want to talk to me? How are we on the same level? That's crazy. How is that possible? And I still feel the same when I see that. Like, I see the name Sigil and Sigil 2 and then Legacy of Rust. I'm like, why are these allowed to be next to each other? What's going on here? It's crazy in the best way. And like, Sigil's story is amazing to me because like, you have somebody who made the original game back in the day, basically kind of revisit it after a very long absence. And the types of things that he does in maps and Sigil are actually very unusual to see. Like, the level itself is the enemy, not necessarily the monsters that you fight. Like, Sigil and its sequel kind of had this very sort of evil feel to the levels. Like, the actual architecture itself is out to get you. And that's awesome. I love that. Like, that's something that if you're making a map set for Doom 1, that's almost kind of what you have to do, because Doom 2's bestiary, Mancubus and Arachnotrons and Archviles, Revenants, those don't exist in Doom 1. So because the gameplay depth is not quite there in terms of what monsters you fight, in order to make the maps interesting and intriguing, you have to figure out how to make the levels the enemy. And Sigil and Sigil 2 are some of the best examples ever. And this was done by somebody who not only made the original game, but came back after ages and was just like, I'm just going to do my own thing. I'm not going to relearn how to do maps. I'm going to make this strange, oppressive thing in my own way. And it freaking works. One anecdote I want to share, because like we all thought it was the funniest thing. So at this point, many years ago, there was a project called Doom the Way It Did. And its sequel, Doom 2 the Way It Did. And the entire premise was basically, we were like, okay, what if the id guys had made a 10th map for each episode? What would it look like? And that evolved into, you know, a full replacement of levels that were meant to mimic the style of the original authors. So literally it was like somebody trying to pretend to be Sandy Peterson and make some evil traps in the Doom 2 map. But like we got really into it, like really started breaking apart. Here are the tropes. Here's the way that John Romero does his detailing and his supports. Here are the types of traps that Sandy puts in his maps. Here's the visual styles of the author. Here's how they use lighting. Here's like it was crazy the level of detail that we went into. And so those projects came out, people liked them, all that. And then, you know, a decade plus later, John Romero releases Sigil, and we all look at it and be like, oh man, that doesn't look at all like what we thought. Like if somebody had submitted this level, we would have rejected it because it wasn't close enough to John Romero. But the reason why that's the case is because, okay, we were analyzing John Romero in his Doom days, whereas, well, he went on to make Quake and Daikatana and lots of other games, and, you know, lots of game design at Romero Games before even starting Sigil. And so his career path and his sort of like way that he designs games and designs levels like has evolved so much since the days of Doom 2 that whenever you come back to Sigil, like it's something totally different. It's something unique that we wouldn't have expected, if that makes sense. Like when he released Tech Gone Bad, that was a single map release that came out a little bit before Sigil. We were all just sort of like the red cracks on the ground, which later became sort of like the Sigil trademark. It was so distinct and unique and something that is just like new John Romero. That's his style. Like that's a thing that he does that, you know, you don't really see in other maps. And when we looked at that, we were just sort of like, wow, that is not at all what we would have guessed somebody would do. And he came out and was like, hey, here's something unusual and it's awesome. So yeah, the Sigils are great. And the way that he was able to sort of come back and identify the best way in my head of making Doom 1 maps, make the map itself oppressive, like he just nailed it in one take. Like that's great.
Do you get to have any interaction either with John or just with, I don't know, maybe with John is the actual question, but to me, you're outside looking in, you worked with id, you worked with MachineGames, you have Sigil in the umbrella of the Doom 1 and 2 collection. Like, do you get to have a lot of interaction and have those conversations with those teams?
Yes, I was lucky enough. I did get brought into Sigil 1 and a little bit into Sigil 2 as like a technical consultant. Like I helped do some QA and technical fixes and stuff like that. So like I did get to see parts of it before release, but by the time I showed up, like the maps were basically all done. And I didn't have any sort of like influence over the map design. Not that I would have wanted to, but yeah, I did get a chance to like talk with him and speak with him. And John Romero's just a cool, chill dude. Like it's when you see him it's so fun because when you hear about stories of John and company back in the id era and the Daikatana days and stuff, you kind of get this crazy rock star personality. And then you meet the guy in person and he's just like the chillest person in the universe. It's like, dang, you mellowed out in the best way. Like, yeah, working with John is great. And I wish, you know, part of me is like, oh, we need to have more fun conversations like this. And one of these days I'd love to just sneak over to Ireland for a bit and grab a beer with the guy. So if you're listening to this, hey, send me a message. If not, I'll send you one.
That's cool.
Yeah, but it still floors me that even happened. Like, wait, you're putting me in touch with the guy? He wants to talk? Why is that allowed?
It is one of those neat things. I've had the chance through XEP to meet some of my heroes for various reasons. And they always say, don't meet your heroes, but when you get to, and they are awesome and just good people or fun to talk to, or are willing to give you the time and chat with you and speak like human beings, it's fantastic.
Yeah. I actually, this is getting a little bit off of games and into philosophy things. the don't meet your heroes idea, I actually completely disagree with that. Do meet your heroes, because a lot of the times you'll end up realizing, hey, these are just normal people. And this is important if you're wanting to be like, if you're an aspiring creative. To me, learning and knowing that the person you idolize is just a chill dude makes it a lot easier. Like, oh, wait, I don't have to be some insane savant rock star in order to succeed because I meet this person and they're actually just a normal guy. Like, that's amazing to me. And if you do meet your heroes and they turn out to be an asshole, then you don't want them to be your hero.
Right.
So it's a good filter. And to me, like, the ability to sort of meet them and realize these are people, like, that sort of demystification is amazing to me. Actually, like, that's way cooler than, like, I would there's some other people I'm like, I want to meet this person and talk with them because I think they're super cool. But part of it is also because I want to know them as a person. I don't want to know them as just a name. And so fortunately, a lot of the id guys and John have sort of like ascended from being a guy I put on a pedestal to being a person I talk with. And that is an upgrade in every way. So do meet your heroes if you ever get a chance, because that's, I think, very important to know that they're just a person like you. Like, that's good.
Incredibly well said. And I can't agree more, because I've had just so many wonderful opportunities, and it's empowering when you get to talk to one or two or three of them. Like, yeah, I reached out to John Carmack. No idea if he'll ever see the message, but like, why not? Right? Like, why not? Because these are just people that make things, and we get to enjoy their art. And I really appreciate that aspect of it.
Yeah. So I'm glad to hear that you get that as well as an interviewer, because, like, we've had a great conversation. The Romero interview was great, but it seems like you've kind of hit a nice spot where you're able to just have a conversation and talk about fun things. And being able to do that with people that you idolize isn't the right word, but sort of like have always respected, like, that's great. And I'm so glad you've had the opportunity to do that. Like,
thanks, man.
It's huge.
This is one of those times, because Legacy of Rust for me is on a pedestal. So,
oh my gosh.
You know, we're here passing compliments, but I do think it's true. And I hope people are catching the truth in it, because yeah, like, I play the work and I'm like, man, you make games. To me, that's cool. Right. I will loop back for a moment, because there were two things that we've not touched on, which was that was a very fun rabbit hole, by the way. And I hope John, it'd be cool if they did listen to this, you know.
Yeah.
But one thing that we didn't mention, you worked as a composer for a lot of Legacy of Rust as well. And I got to tell you, I've been really on a deep dive of Doom and learning and prepping for various interviews and coverage and stuff. And like, when I hear some of the classic Doom songs, when I listen to the more recent Mick Gordon stuff, that just makes me want to rip and tear like crazy. And then I listen to Legacy of Rust, it's still Doom, but it doesn't sound like those two things. And I mean that as a compliment. Tell me about your process in making music for them, because it was different. At least it felt different in the version I played.
Thanks. Yeah, that's good to hear, because it was meant to be different. So Doom music is a tricky thing to define if you are submerged in the classic Doom community, because the modern Doom games are sort of like Mick Gordon's style. Like, that is Doom. Like, that is Doom music has a very, very specific identity when it comes to the modern games. But then whenever you go to the classic games, it has taken a completely different direction. Like, even Bobby Prince's original Doom tracks are a far cry from the types of stuff you typically hear in Doom mods these days. And a lot of that is just personal styles of folks like Jimmy Paddock. He's a legend in the Doom community who's just written probably thousands of songs at this point. It's insane, definitely hundreds. And the original concept of like writing Doom MIDI music, like, took a life of its own and almost has its own sort of style. So when I was approaching Legacy of Rust, part of the question I was asking was, okay, we've got two different definitions of Doom music. Which one do we want to pick? Because this is going to be presented front and center as sort of a quote unquote official Doom thing. If we deviate too much, that might be weird, right? And me being me, the answer I settled on was, let's do both. So So yeah, you're going to hear some djenty guitars in some of the tracks, and you're going to hear some very strange noodle melodies. That a lot of that was actually me sort of inspired by Lee Jackson, who did music for Rise of the Triad and a lot of classic games back in the day. That was a big influence on just me personally as a composer. And like the most flattering comparison that I've gotten, because people have said this before, and I'm like, why? It's crazy. Is people will be like, hey, that music sounds like Toby Fox. And I'm like, what, really? Like there's sort of like this sort of video game epic music sounds that you tend to hear, like people associate a lot with Undertale and Deltarune and Homestuck and a lot of those projects that like, I've always loved that sound. And I think this was probably a case of convergent evolution because, you know, a lot of my inspirations are drawn from like old school tracker music and like 90s JRPGs, Final Fantasies and things. And they all kind of conglomerate together to make this sort of video game soundtracky sound that I've just always liked. And so I wanted to inject that DNA and reference a little bit of the musical style of the Doom modding community on top of making it a little bit heavy in parts because that fits Doom. So a lot of the tracks were just kind of me jamming out and doing stuff and then figuring out later where it fit. But there's one in particular that's very intentionally placed, and that is the second maps track for Sanguine Waste to the song. It's called Shores of Heaven. I put that one very early in the episode on purpose because like I wanted to show, hey, this is very weird and unusual if you're expecting like modern Doom music, but I think it works and I want you to hear it. So I put it in an early map slot just so that gets showcased earlier. And I think it worked because when you talk to people about the soundtrack, that is by far the most popular song from it. Like that's seems to be the running community favorite is that one. And I'm
like,
it
your favorite?
It's not, but also I feel weird picking my own favorites because A, it's my own stuff, and B, a little bit of a rambly tangent. But a friend of mine ages ago told me a bit of wisdom I've always taken to heart since he brought it up, is that if I'm personally dissatisfied with something, like here's my least favorite track on the album or whatever, and it's somebody else's favorite, and they hear me talk about it in a negative light, they start feeling weird for liking the thing that I hate. Like there's a power you have as a creator that can sometimes be misused, not even intentionally, but I always shy away nowadays from things like there's old mods that I think are just crap that I made. And if somebody comes out and compliments it and they say they like it, one of the worst things I can do is talk about how much it sucks, because then I'm accidentally telling them that their opinion is wrong. And that's not great to hear from somebody that you like their works of. So there are songs in the soundtrack that I'm really happy with, and there's songs that I'm like, I just kind of shout that out and I'm not that excited about. And Shores of Heaven is up there, but it's not like, I think my personal favorite is probably Tactical Blasphemy. That's the track for map 7. It's that's
a Kaiser map, right?
Yes. Yeah, that's why am I blanking on the name of my own episode?
Forfeited Salvation. I pulled the list.
Yes, that's
I didn't
Salvation.
just know that off the top of my head.
Yeah. Thanks. But yeah, I that one is my favorite just because it came together like in a weekend. And I like, it was fun writing little melodies and stuff, but it was just sort of this crazy burst of creativity. And I almost feel like it hits both points of the soundtrack very well, where it's like heavy, it's got guitars. I spent a lot of time on the drums in that track for once. Like sometimes I just sort of like, people have pointed out the drum tracks, and I'm like, I'm actually kind of surprised in a good way, because some of the tracks I kind of just zombie did stuff and I don't think I paid attention to what I was doing, but I did on a couple, and that was one of them. Both sides of the philosophy of the soundtrack came together in that song, because it's heavy, but also has like some melody lines, the wistful breakdown, as I call it at the end, where stuff gets all fancy chords, whatever. I don't know. I'm bad at describing music. I'm not classically trained in any way. I just kind of jam out. But I don't know. That was the one that to me was like, I felt most happy with, because it came together really quickly and it showcased kind of what I wanted for the soundtrack the most. One other that I'll point out is Callous Regard. That's the music for E1M4 Descending Inferno. that was one of the earlier tracks I wrote, and that was the first one that I wrote where I was like, yes, this is what I want for the episode. Like it was some, I was sort of experimenting around a little bit and had some older tracks that I was playing with, and I just wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. And then when I wrote Callous Regard, I was like, oh, this is it. This is the sound. I'm gonna seek that. So it's, far from the best one, I think, but that was the midpoint where I decided, where I kind of felt like I knew what I was doing. That's rare for me in music. Is most of the time I'm just throwing stuff at a wall and having fun with it. Like, I'm not a professional musician in any sense. Like, this is basically the closest I've ever had to an album release. Mm-hmm. And it is one of the very rare times where I've sort of approached writing music with intent. Like, oh, this actually needs to sound like something. I need to put some brain cells into this. And so the process was new and strange, and I wasn't sure what I was doing a little bit. And then that one track hit, and I'm like, okay, I think we might have something here. And seems like it worked.
It did.
Yeah, believe it or not, Shores of Heaven was written before that. That was actually one of the older tracks. Shores of Heaven predates Legacy of Rust. I had that. I just wrote it on a whim, and it was sitting in my back pocket for ages. And I decided this is probably good enough for the episode. But like, that actually was a song that I had long before I ever we started Rust. And so there is some fun irony how the track that I think people remember the most is one of the two that wasn't written for the episode. And I'm like, okay.
That is interesting.
Fun coincidence. Yeah.
It is a fun coincidence. That's neat little tidbits that I like just knowing.
Yeah.
I'm going to switch gears briefly before we start rounding out. I want to go back to our discussions of lore for a moment, because in making Legacy of Rust, you obviously got to work with new enemies, which is crazy cool, right? Like, not just like the Banshee and the Ghoul, but like the Tyrant was in there, the Shock Trooper was in there. But by far the Visago stands out as like the new big bad cool thing that I think is just really fascinating. You also had to, or got to rather, work with the Incinerator and the Calamity Blade. Did you have to run these by like id Software or say, hey, is this a thing that I can do in this campaign? Or did you have free reign to create?
I felt like I had free reign. I was, keeping them informed at every step of the process, but I don't think I ever hit a case where they had to tell me, nah, you can't do that. Like, I don't think that ever happened during the project. Like, there's some common sense guidelines, things like, I think one of the harder things a little bit is that because it's sort of like an in-house production, you can't just use community-made assets. That's, plagiarism. So you can't use textures that were created and posted on the Doom World forums. So with that restriction, okay, we have to keep things in-house. But that was just something that, to me, was a constraint of the project from the beginning. And so that didn't feel like a limiting factor that much. And there was never any sort of question on it. So that was like the main sort of limitation that they would have said no on. And it didn't really come up because we didn't have to worry about it, because we had access to the vault. It was crazy. We had all this stuff. But no, the design of the Visago and all that stuff, like, people were just kind of excited about it. Heck, even the soundtrack, I didn't actually ask for permission to make music. I just started making it and posted it, and we're like, do y'all like this? And they're like, yeah. And they just let me keep doing it. It was so weird. So that's part of what reinforced this idea of, it felt like a community produced project as opposed to any sort of formal game dev, with publisher mandates or, whatever thing people think in their heads. And I mean, working with id, I still get that vibe. Like, I kind of got that vibe when it came to adding modding features to the Kex port for, like, once I started at Nightdive. So it's kind of like hey, there's some restrictions, but if you're doing something and it's cool and it makes sense and it's not stupid, yeah, go for it. Like, it's kind of it's very permissive creativity, and I really like that vibe. And it was that way throughout the entire development. Like, I'm sure that if I tried to do something dumb, like, I don't know, write a backstory that directly contradicted the lore of the new games, that might be like, why are you doing that? That's just going to confuse people. But I think that's just a case of, if you did that period, somebody would reasonably look at that and be like, that seems bad, right? Like, just quality wise, why would you do that? That's silly. So if that type of feedback had come out, I wouldn't have even seen it as, hey, we're telling you what to do, as much as it is giving feedback saying, hey, that doesn't work. Like, just change it because this might work better. But that never really came to light that much. I mean,
interesting. Yeah, that's interesting to me because we had what, Doom Eternal was 2020, and yeah, 2020 time, and then that means Doom: The Dark Ages had to have been in the last few years. So that would mean that Legacy of Rust and Dark Ages they're being made concurrently. Like, will we or could we or would we see like the Calamity Blade or the Visago show up there at any point?
I have no idea. That would be amazing. I would probably not expect it just because the timeline, like they had to have been working on Dark Ages for years before like we even started with Legacy. So like that would be like a really late addition if there's like an Easter egg or something that references it. I would just be floored in the best way if like future modern Doom games had call outs and references to it. I mean, there's references to Doom 64 and Doom Eternal. Like you get the Unmaker as a weapon, which is so cool. So like that said, there's some reverse things. Like the Calamity Blade is straight up the Destroyer Blade from Doom Eternal, but it's the other way around. It's like, here's me kind of referencing a thing for the new games. That would be so flattering and amazing to see. But whether it will actually happen, I would be surprised if it did. But like you bet your butt, I would be like celebrating like crazy if I saw something like that, because like any sort of feature in the new Doom games, they're amazing. Like I'm still sort of surprised we're in an era where there's new Doom modern games coming out and they're really, really, really good. I remember when Doom 2016 was first being previewed and everybody in the Doom community was like, oh, it's gonna suck.
Yeah, there was a trepidation, wasn't there?
Yeah, we were all worried because like, no, there's no way they can pull it off. And then the game came out and we were like, oh, yeah, okay, never mind. So yeah, we're despite the new game being titled The Dark Ages, in the real world, we're in the opposite of that when it comes to Doom. We are in Doom: The Golden Ages. Like the amount of community output that's going on in the modding community is like higher than ever, and the new games are killing it. And we've got a new one coming out in like less than a month.
Less than a month from the time of this recording.
It's crazy. Yeah, by the time people watch this, they may already be playing it on a different window.
So all right, check this. In watching the most recent Doom: The Dark Ages trailer, they showcased the Cosmic Realm. And all I could think of, Xaser, was, well, let me make this a question, not a me pitching. Could you see yourself creating a Doom campaign in the Kex engine or whatever it is, where it's not Legacy of Rust, but it's like Legacy of Cosmic, where you almost reverse engineer what that Cosmic Realm looks like and make it classic Doom?
Oh, I would love that so much. Like, I love that aesthetic. Like the entire, it's a little bit cliche, but the Lovecraftian angle that it has to it is just totally my jam. What I would love to do is like pull that in and then kind of go one aesthetic I've always loved is, I don't know what the proper term for it is. I call it ocean hell. It's like green and murky and everything's swampy and there's barnacles to everything and there's tentacles and Cthulhu beasts and stuff like that. A map set that is sort of themed like that then leads into like a dark cosmic realm would be an amazing thing to see in the classic Doom engine. And that's something that is not often explored in Doom modding space. So it hits both my notes. Like, this would be a cool thing to do theme wise, and it's something that is unusual compared to stuff that gets released all the time in Doom. So it's like fresh and new and would totally fit, because now that identity exists in a modern Doom game, like that's gonna, I want to see that aesthetic take hold in modern and classic Doom, because it's awesome and I want to see more of it. So I would love to work on something like that. That would be so cool.
Do you think you could create some of those weapons that we see in Dark Ages, or maybe some of the weapons that we've seen in, well, you already did reverse engineer with the Calamity Blade, but like, could you make some of those Dark Ages weapons for some of that classic Doom style?
Yeah, I would love to do that. Like Skull Crusher, the rail, like the whatever the heck that nail gun is called, like that stuff is insane to me. But my favorite like, which would be kind of hard to put in unless you started adding a lot of features, is I want to have the shield, man. Like that's the coolest thing from Dark Ages for me. And that's just coming from me as like a FromSoft guy. I'm like, oh, can I just add a shield parry to everything? Like, I'm sure there's people who are Doom fans who are watching this and groaning when I say that, like, oh, is it gonna do that? Oh my gosh, that doesn't belong in Doom. But I feel like that kind of stuff could totally work. But yeah, I absolutely would source inspiration from Dark Ages weaponry. And like the fact that the weapons are taking such an unusual but still heavy metal turn, it's that same philosophy of how do you do something that's fresh but still Doom? And they're nailing it with the feel of the weapons in the new game. And I'm really, really looking forward to trying those out in less than a month. It's so crazy. It's almost here. And like I'm going to be traveling, and I got to get my Steam Deck ready. So when it launches, I'll be playing on day one. And but I would absolutely be looking at that for inspiration for this set, if not on other projects. I mean, there's so much to draw from, and the concept, the theme, the aesthetic. Like I've always been like a big fan of the sort of ancient tech angle of like the Sentinels and Doom Eternal, and I want to see more of that kind of stuff in classic Doom. It hasn't really taken hold yet, but like that sort of thing is, I don't know, it's I like themes. I like new themes, and that would be a really good one to sort of lean into. And now Dark Ages is giving us a lot more, so we're eating good in the Doomland.
We are, and consider this a formal request, Xaser, for the I would like the Legacy of Cosmic. Just if you could just, hey, Luke wants this, and then just pass it on to your friends and see what they can do. That'd be great. I'd appreciate that.
Oh my gosh. The gears are turning now. That would be so cool.
Yeah, that would be cool. Well, look, you mentioned the Steam Deck. I will say the Doom 1 and 2 collection is available on all platforms. I've played it on multiple platforms, including my Steam Deck, including my Xbox, my PC. I absolutely love it. That's where you can play Legacy of Rust and a number of other Xaser's works, as well as the entire Doom Legacy collection. I keep saying Xaser because I'm just getting excited. Xaser, is there anything that you would like to plug or point people to or celebrate with us before we exit today?
Oh my gosh, there's too much. But yeah, just big, huge shout outs to everybody at Nightdive and folks in the Doom community that have just like helped me out over the years. Like ultimately, I feel like anything I do is standing on the shoulders of giants. Like I've been hanging around in the Doom space for like 20 plus years. And what keeps coming me back to it. Wow. Thanks, English. What keeps me coming back to it, there we go, is partially the modding, but also because, you know, the people involved are just cool, fun people I'm proud to call my friends. So like, I got to say hi to Sarah, Bouncy, Kate, I know you're watching. Hi. Alex, same deal. It's just like, I feel bad when I say it, because I'm like, I'm leaving out hundreds of names, like, and that's not even an exaggeration. So, yeah, at this point, I don't necessarily have a whole lot of super plug stuff. I've been working on a very fun Nightdive project, but it's unannounced, so I can't yet plug it, but just stay tuned. We're going to have some really cool stuff I think people are going to be excited about really soon. But it's Nightdive. People know. People know to look when there's a Nightdive release. I don't think I have to plug it. Just in general, if you're watching this and you're not necessarily that well-versed in Doom mods, like definitely do pick up the expansions, but like look at Doom modding. Look at the Doom modding community and see the kind of output that they have, because you would be floored at how deep the well runs. And something to keep in mind is that, yes, the original games are good and legendary, but you've got people in the community that have been making stuff for 20 plus years and are still making things. And so to have that level of experience going into like a bit of game design, like the types of things that you see in the Doom community are just impossibly good. Like go play it. Like you would be floored. So do it. That's my plug. Go play Doom mods.
Love it. Xaser Acheron, Nightdive Studios, senior programmer on the Kex teams, composer, level designer, modder. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you very much for having me on. It's been fun. Oh my gosh.
That is going to do it for this interview. Thank you guys so much for watching, listening. Please click the like button, share it with people that you think might enjoy it. Have a fantastic rest of your week. Take care, everybody.
Peace.